Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third meeting of our age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate work group. I appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. In case we have any new attendees, I'd just like to go over a little bit of housekeeping. We do have members of the public on this call. Unless you are a work group member, please keep yourself on mute until the end of our meeting. At that time, there will be an opportunity for the public to provide any comments. A quick review of our hour together. We are going to follow the same format as we did last week. I don't believe we need any introductions today as we don't have any new work group members. We're going to review our purpose, make sure we're grounded in our success criteria, review our previous work from last week. I put together some meeting minutes for us. We're going to continue the work, and then of course, open the floor up for public comment at the end. So you'll notice I updated the slide slightly from last week, just to put age appropriate or developmentally appropriate together. I know we did not come to a conclusion on that last week, but I did update it just for us to, just to reiterate the discussion that we had. So within the context of section 1001.428C of the Florida statutes, this work group will define age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. And again, just to make sure that we are all on the same page, our context is very important. So let's just review this really quickly. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. And again, that's in section 1001.428C of the Florida statutes. And our success criteria. We are working together to provide a clear proposed definition for Florida school districts, parents, and other stakeholders to ensure the application of section 1001.428C Florida statutes with fidelity. As I reflected in preparation for our meeting today, I saw both our work group comments and our public comments about the subjectivity of said definition, and it really grounded me back into the success criteria to make sure that we're really focused on providing that guidance to school districts, parents, and other stakeholders. And in addition to that, that point, we have our second, that we need to reflect upon the feedback from stakeholders to ensure that the interests of Florida's diverse student population and public school districts are accounted for. So we're going to go on to our meeting minutes. Catch up. So I consulted my written notes and our transcript of last week meeting to try to put together clear and concise meeting minutes. So we'll just review really quickly. Last week we had in attendance Christopher Combest from Hamilton County and Kelly Brower from Marion. After we reviewed the purpose and the success criteria and we reviewed the timelines, we had some comments on the readings of House Bill 1557 and section 100142 of the Florida statutes, and we talked about our task, Then we talked about any consultations of people and or research from the previous week. Chris Combas shared that he had consulted the social worker on the elementary campus of the Hamilton K-12 school. And then Kelly Brower shared research that she had utilized during the prior week. So she shared a definition from Oregon. Then we have a citation here from a research source. Sorry, my words escaped me for a second. And then also we talked about that she had done some research with the National Association for the Education of Young Children. A couple of sites from Penn State were shared, and the Oregon site link and the citation above were shared. And we all decided that we were going to, in this week, review these. We worked together we discussed together. There's a difference between defining the terms together with the word or, like it is in statute, or if those terms should be defined separately. No decision was made, but further discussion was encouraged, and we did decide that we needed a starting point, and we decided to use the language on the next slide, which comes from Oregon, which I would like to say here. Many of you probably don't know me, but I led the writing of the Florida Best Standards for Mathematics. And I'm really proud of that work, and I'm so proud of all of the educators around the state that worked with us on that project. It's been the most incredible thing to be a part of. And I think it's important that we know that we had a starting place with the Florida, with the best standards also, which was the Florida standards, which we all know in many ways were just, like the Common Core standards. We had some minor variations, but you have to have a starting point. And then we took those standards and we made the changes based on our Florida students. And what was so exceptional about that is that we had all those years and years and years of teaching experience, lessons learned in the classroom to help us inform the standards. And we truly made a product that was by Florida teachers for Florida students. And I just want to say that this is the same type of work. We are, taking some language just to give us a starting point, but I just want to reiterate the fact that we have a work group together here that represents many years of teaching experience in Florida. Our work group members started as classroom teachers and have, been so devoted to our students over the years. They've, progressed into leadership roles, and we could not do this work without them. So I just want to take a moment to just share how special I believe this is for our students, because we truly are looking at this. If we reflect back to our success criteria, we're taking into account our Florida students when we are developing these definitions, or if it is a sole definition because we decide to connect the two terms with the word or. Either way that we end up going with our proposed definitions, they're going to impact classroom instruction of Florida students and all of our Florida students. So it's a big ask for our work group members, so I'm very appreciative to them, but I just want to reiterate that this language is just giving us a starting point. And again, as I said earlier, I reflected back on the comments last week, both from our work group and our public comments about subjectivity. And I think we have a ways to go. But I am very excited about getting to work on this today. So I want to tell you that I have slightly altered our timeline, and I made a really unfortunate decision. I it's okay. So when we have these meetings, I have to publicly notice them, which means it takes about 10 days to get through the process of doing that internally, so that everyone's aware of the dates. And when I looked through to set the dates, I was looking for days that I had availability, and I chose November 11th as one of those dates, which it was very open on my calendar, but I didn't realize it was Veterans Day. My son is a veteran, so I should have, I cooked Veterans Day dinner for him on Veterans Day. I should have known that, but I just didn't. So if we, we need to go ahead and, try to stick to our timeline. But if you can't be a part of the meeting on that day, it's certainly understandable. And I really apologize for that. It's totally unintentional. But I did set 3 new dates for us because I had to have that advance notice. I had to push them out in November. So the first date is November 3rd, and then November 11th and November 17th. So again, we are going to shift our date that we're hoping that will be completed to November 17th. And I didn't change the December 5th date because I still am ambitious in thinking that we could possibly get done by then, but we will adjust as needed as the work dictates. Okay, so to help us, I made 2 things I learned last week. One was that I needed to make sure that I was cognizant of checking my email before the meeting to make sure if any links had come through for me to share in the meeting, and hopefully have time to peruse them myself, which I did. And we did have some shared. And so I learned that last week. And I also learned that we needed some sort of working document so that we can manipulate the language as we're talking. And also so we could keep kind of a journal of our progress throughout these work group meetings. So I am going to switch us over to a working document, and then we'll come back to this to finish out and do our public comment. So going to share okay, so you should be able now to see our Word document. I'm going to slide us up to the top just so you can see. It's kind of just, rolling through our weekly agenda, our meeting minutes. It's still, okay. My wonderful moderator, Jim Ellington, is telling me it's taken a minute to catch up. Are we good? Oh. It's taken a long minute. I had it loaded beforehand, but I guess that didn't work. Let me try again. Oh, I see what you're saying. Let's try pause. If I bring this up first.
Sure. And then Windows 5.
Oh, that one?
Yep.
Great. All right. Now we're doing good. I was gonna say one of my corny Southern sayings that I do. We're cooking with gas. So here we are. We are back on here. I put the agenda, the meeting minutes, and so we're going to scroll down. And so these were all of the resources that were shared last week. And this is our language that we can work with. And then We also have today, we have the research that Kelly Brower and Chris Combath shared. So now I'm going to open this up to our work group because we have our working document and I'm here to act as a scribe. And so work group members, please feel free to unmute and turn your cameras on and we can start wherever you guys would like to. Are we good?
Hey, Miss Duncan, can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Well, for some reason, I can't turn my camera on, but that's probably for the best anyway, But
We'll see if we can do, apparently it must be on your end, Chris, but please go ahead.
all right. So just from looking over some of the research that Kelly did last week, I was kind of looking back through the Penn State definition, and I think you kind of reflected that in your minutes. I did find one section that kind of stuck out. It said all teaching practices should be appropriate to children's age and developmental status, attuned to them as unique individuals and responsive to the social and cultural context in which they live. That kind of went hand in hand with some of our discussion last week, because I think you do have to take into consideration the parts of the state that we're from. What may be acceptable in one area may not be in another. I like the language there. And the more I thought about our conversation last week, using the language as it's written in statute with age appropriate or developmentally appropriate, I think kind of sticks out to me, just because, we did have a discussion about, yes, a child's age, it may seem appropriate at the time, but knowing the children that we teach, and we know that knowing their background, and then maybe they haven't developed to the point that they should have. I think we need to take that into consideration as we're pushing out our instruction. So that kind of stuck out. And then I shared a link from Michigan State with you, and I think you've kind of posted that for today's work. That kind of reiterated some of those points that we discussed last week. It seemed that every time I would look at a definition from a site, they were all typically the same. I'm like you, I think we still have a long ways to go to kind of take some of that subjectivity out of it. And if I need to share the link from Michigan State, I will, but I see that you have it posted right there.
It might be easier for the folks that are on the call, though, if you put it in the chat, because then they could click on it and they wouldn't have to try to, find the link off of my document. So if you don't mind, Chris, putting that in the chat, that's probably helpful to everybody for quick access. And as we discuss any of these work group members, let's go ahead and add the link to the chat. So if y'all want to be primed for that, if you don't mind doing that, it's a little easier probably on your end than it is mine, quicker, because I'm on this smart board and I'm not as I don't have my multiple screens to be able to multitask and pull things over.
Okay, I'll be glad to post that.
Thank you.
I'm going to share another link with the group as well.
Okay.
And you guys may have already seen this. It was from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. A lot of similar definitions to this article. And they kind of use some of the same language. It says to be developmentally appropriate, practices must also be culturally, linguistically, and ability appropriate for each child. So I will share that.
Please share that, yes. Was
Hi.
Phillips, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just had a question because I missed last week.
Oh, sure.
And I'm sorry. I couldn't. Every time I tried to get into the link you sent today, I couldn't get in. And this is Leah from Osceola. When I just have a clarifying question, and I apologize if you went through it last week.
Oh, no problem.
When we are saying things like developmentally or culturally or age, is there anywhere that we need to define it? When you say based on research, my background is more of a science basis. Do we need to pull in other defining pieces in that definition? Like, what do we mean by cognitively ready? Is there anything that we need to define that as well? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
So-
I didn't, and I don't know if we've discussed that or not. I just want to make sure if I'm doing research, I'm doing the right research.
Oh, sure. And I appreciate that question. I don't know that we really discussed that level of detail in the research last week, but I, like you, have a science background as well. And I would say that I think we need to cite all of the research. So yes, if you are doing research into a term that we're going to use in our definition, I think we need to cite that research. So please, you cannot provide too many citations for what you're using, because we want to make sure we have a complete I guess package of research that can go along with this. So yes, that's a great question, Leah. I appreciate that. And so please do so. I had a quick question for Chris. Chris, when you were, I'm trying to make sure I'm taking notes as well. The definition that you read earlier, was that found in the link that you provided from MSU?
So the first definition was from the Penn State research.
Okay.
It was the extension.psu.edu, where it kind of referenced social and cultural context in which a child lives. And so, and then the other was from the naeyc.org website that I just posted in the chat, which you kind of talked about the practices must also be culturally, linguistically, and ability appropriate for each child. As far as the Michigan State article that I shared in the chat, and I see that you have it in the notes there, it was speaking a lot of the same language. It says that developmentally appropriate practice requires teachers to be aware of children's development, meet them where they are as individuals, and know about the social and cultural context in which each child lives. So, three different sources, and, all three are kind of referencing that. Again, it's still a little subjective. I'm like you guys. I think we probably need to get a little bit more specific when it comes to that.
I really like the language of meet them where they are as individuals, because that is, instructionally speaking, that is the same message that we are providing to support instruction in the content areas. So I feel like that language would be something, as much as possible, I think for our teachers, it's great to try to stay with common language, because it's, even down to a learning objective versus a learning goal. if you can stay with similar language, it really does help with that understanding when you're looking at communicating with thousands of people at the same time that you may never be able to have a conversation with. So I think that is really a good point out of that MSU piece. I'm making good notes here so that, you know, I can go back maybe and we can try to put some of this language into our definition if we get that far today and we want to work with it some. So I have a thought that I as a work group member, I will share a wondering that I had from this week when I was, you know, I kind of doing my homework, making sure that I reviewed all the resources from last week and just kind of thinking about all the comments from last week. We certainly want to be certain that we're creating language here that supports all students. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but when we think about our students that are in our exceptional student education programs, there's some language there that I think we probably need to look at as well in terms of age and developmentally appropriate, so that we make sure that we are complementing that language and not creating any, you know, sometimes there's misunderstanding between two pieces of guidance, so we need to make sure of that. And I just want to put that out there as we are going to have a little bit longer of a break between our next meeting. I just want to put that out there as food for thought that we think about and make sure that we are keeping in mind that we have some students that, you know, we definitely need to make sure that guidance is in line with what comes out of to support students supported from those programs. Do we have, you know, would you guys have any additional, do we want to discuss any of the additional resources? Is Kelly with us? No, okay. I will just scroll down. Kelly went ahead and provided, after the meeting last week, she did some additional research. So she sent that to me as well. So she sent through to me these links. I wonder, I mean, it took me a bit to go through, access the links and read through. So I don't know that that's a great use of our time now when we can actually talk with one another. So I'm thinking that I was hoping that we could just kind of discuss it based on Kelly's review. But since she's not here, I don't want to discuss it without her here as well. So I'm thinking that perhaps this would be good food for thought for us to look at between now and our next meeting. Just because I don't want to leave Kelly out of the conversation. So she did say in the email, she just sent these links and said that she had done additional research based on our conversations last week and was making sure that I had this information. So I will make sure that you all have all of these links as well so that you can go through and read. The notes here are just too short to really do it justice. It took me quite a while to go through all of them. But there's also some similarity. I'm just trying to scroll through kind of slowly so that everybody can take a look. This link did not work for me, and I tried to find it by myself so that I could correct it, and it wasn't easy fix, and I didn't want to cite the wrong thing. So I'm going to have to check with Kelly to see if we can get there. Perhaps I copied it over wrong. I did see one edit up on the top that I need to make, because I believe there were 2 links to Penn State, 2 different links, and it seems that the links I included here are the same. So when I copied it, perhaps I didn't copy the second time. All right, so I think if you guys are okay, maybe we could move back to this language that we had started working on, or not working on, but we had decided to work from, and see if there's any conversation that could be had here. So I'm just going to pose a question. Chris, earlier you said that you had some ideas about age appropriate or developmentally appropriate, if we should define them together or separate. Did you mean that you were thinking we should leave them like they are in the statute language, connected with the word or?
Yes.
Okay.
And just from looking in the chat box, I see that someone has notated some language that's already in statute that I pulled up, which definitely I think we should make sure that our definition kind of coincides with that, if at all possible. If you want me to, I can paste that language over into the chat.
That'd be great.
Okay.
The wonderful thing about Teams is when I get done with the meeting, I can pull the transcript and all the chat, and it's easier for me to be able to make sure my own handwritten notes are accurate. Okay, so my assistant here has helped me. We are looking at, oh, I see. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. From 39.4091, participation in childhood activities, 2A states age appropriate means activities or items that are generally accepted as suitable for children of the same chronological age or level of maturity. Age appropriateness is based on the development of cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral capacity that is typical for an age or age group. Thank you very much for sharing. That is out of a statute underneath the judicial branch. So certainly we do need to make sure that we are cognizant of that definition.
I guess my next question would be, so as we develop this definition, do we have certain parameters that we're trying to stay in? I know some definitions can be longer than others. So do you already have kind of an idea of how you would want this to look, or just we address it until we have a clear understanding of what it means to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate?
Well, okay. So my initial thought is, one thing I learned through the standards work is that being clear and concise is really helpful to districts. So I think it needs to, there is no length requirement. There's not a minimum or a maximum. But when you think about communicating information to such a large just a large geographical area. Florida is very large and very diverse. We need to make sure that we have something that's very clear to provide guidance to districts. And if that's a clear definition that is, 50 words long, so be it, 100 words long, or if we, whatever we need to do to ensure that districts have the guidance that that they need, district schools, parents, that everybody is clear on these definitions. And again, just to reiterate, I learned a lot of lessons through the standards work about being clear and concise, particularly when you're communicating externally to K-12 education. It's so important to make sure that we have clear language. So I would say we're with the only guidance that I would have is that we don't, we need to be focused on the amount of information that is going to ensure that districts, schools, teachers, parents, and other stakeholders can understand fully understand this definition. And I know you might notice I typed 3 words. I appreciated the all teachers practices part of that one definition, because I feel like we need to make sure that, and part of that being clear is that this would be for, all teachers practices within their classroom. I just want to give appropriate wait time and make sure if any of the other work group members would like to ask any questions or have any thoughts that we can note here.
Hi, Patricia, this is Glenda with Palm Beach. Can you resend the link from last meeting? You sent it, but I too cannot open that link. I think there's
okay.
a glitch in it. Did you send these written minutes, or are we seeing these minutes for the first time from last meeting?
You are seeing these minutes for the first time from the last meeting. Because we, in the last meeting, because we were trying to capture so much information, it occurred to me that we might need a working document. So this is the first time we've used it, but yes, ma'am, I will certainly, the link to the recording, I had a little trouble loading that link myself. So I will resend the link to you and Leah of last week's meeting. And after this meeting, I will send out this working document to the group. And so that you'll have all the information, the research, so that you can do your own research.
Thank you. That will help tremendously. Because
Absolutely.
as I'm listening, and I don't mean to be silenced, but I'm catching up from last meeting, and I'm sorry that I missed, but
Oh,
had
no.
a board. I was in a board meeting. To be able to look at these notes and just then provide the additional feedback, and most importantly, I'm glad to have the conversation around what does this look like for our exceptional student education, and I'll commit to doing the research along with the research that has already been provided, to share prior to the next time we get on around the exceptional student education piece.
Thank you, Dr. Sheffield. No, we appreciate your participation. It is very, it's much appreciated that all of you, with your busy schedules in your districts and your all of your obligations, that you're adding this onto your plate to assist us with this. So I apologize that the link didn't work, but we will go back and I believe there's a secondary way to get a link and I will do that today and send that to you. And if it doesn't work again, we'll try something else till it does work. And I appreciate the fact that you guys, you know, there's just a lot to think about here. And I think the research is, the ask here for research is tremendous. So I'm going to propose that if we feel like we're at a point where we could open up for public comment, we can go ahead and do that. Let me look. We have about 15 minutes left. But first, I want to make sure is the work group. I know the public comment is very helpful to the work. So but I certainly don't want to end the work group time if there's anything further that we need to discuss this week. Again, we're going to have a nice long break between now and the next meeting, which is going to be November 3rd. So between now and then, we have various definitions to peruse and consider. It would be wonderful if at the next meeting, going to assign some homework. It would be wonderful if we could all sort of draft some language from our research and come to the meeting with some ideas of how we might put all of our, you know, words together. And then we would be able to continue on with developing that definition. So we're going to have a couple weeks to do that. I know that I just want to give the assignment a little attention before we go back for public comment.
I was just going to say, I totally agree with that. I think that if we could maybe even submit something to you prior to our next meeting, with maybe a draft of how we think the definition should look, and just kind of look at the similarities between those and maybe kind of reach a consensus on an appropriate definition. I really like the statement about kind of seeking out our ESE support. I think that I definitely should have a conversation with our ESE coordinator just to kind of get her input and think about those students with special needs and how this definition would impact them. But and just kind of looking at the definition that you started drafting and just kind of looking at the definition and statute, it almost reads word for word. So so I think we're off to a good start.
I think we are too. I mean, this is not an easy task. So we have, you know, we're all trying to be very thoughtful about it, make sure that we're doing all of our research. So, you know, I like that idea a lot, Chris. If everybody would be willing to send in their draft language before the next meeting, I would be glad to pull that into our working document so that when we have the meeting, we would have all the language and we could kind of compare with where we're at. Or, you know, if it's very similar, I could, you know, go ahead and put it together for us and we could save some time on it to leave it for conversation. So if let's just plan that if you have draft language that you would like to share for the meeting, it would be great if I could have it on November 2nd, just to make sure that I have time to get it put together for our meeting. I have lots of competing things on my calendar, so if I have 24 hours, I know I can get it done. So if you guys could get it to me November 2nd, I will, like I said, I'll bring it all together. Irregardless, I'll bring all the language individually And then if I see an easy way to put it together, I'll go ahead and do that for our conversation. If I don't, then I'll wait for you guys together, and we'll do that together. Great idea, Chris. Thank you. So can you see our slides again? Thank you, Jim. All right, so our next slide of our way of work is, now we know we need to add a note there, November 2nd. If you have draft language to share, send that draft language to me so that I can put it into our working document, and I will commit to doing that for us for our meeting, into our working document. And we are working towards a new date to have final draft language composed for leadership by November 17th. Okay, and so before we go on to public comment for our work group, any clarifying questions, general comments, any thoughts from any of our work group members? Okay, great. I really appreciate you guys. I'm going to go ahead now and we're going to open up for public comment. Jim is going to assist me. If you would like to be able to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand. He will unmute you and you can go ahead and add public comment. If you would prefer to put it into the chat, please do so, and he will, I'll read it aloud. And we all, we appreciate your comments as you help us with this work. Okay, we have a comment or question rather, in the chat. I am wondering about timeline. Does the work group have a current definition? Will members be expected to have a final draft on the 5th? My apologies, the 3rd. No, not a final draft. No, for our, I'm thinking that the 3rd, you're referencing our next meeting on November 3rd. No, we are gonna just, we just need to bring together the group with their ideas so that we can put those together and have further comment, further discussion. I'm sure that we will have more research between now and then. Yes, I am in the process of I'm sorry, I should read the question before I answer it. Will there be another meeting scheduled after November 3rd? So right now I'm in the process of publicly noticing those meetings. And I submitted for public noticing November 3rd, November 11th, and November 17th. And my apologies again for November 11th. I didn't mean to schedule it on Veterans Day, but I did. It was a mistake. So yes, we have those 3 on there. And the way this is going to work is we will, if we don't need all those meetings, we won't use all those meetings. If that's not sufficient, we'll publicly notice them again. The only reason for the long break between now and November 3rd is basically just time. It takes time, and there's a process for publicly noticing. And so if you don't know you need them, it makes it kind of hard because you got to have a little gap there. But I think it's a good time in our work to have a gap because we all have individual research to do. There's obviously a lot of thought that's going into this process. This will give everybody time to digest the research and come up with some draft language. But certainly, no, the final draft will not be on the 5th. The 3rd. It would just be another kind of milestone in the process. Oh, we have a comment, question rather. Renza, thank you, and you're welcome. Is there any clarification on the need to define classroom instruction as it relates to the legislation and the 2 definitions you are tasked with? At this time, we have only been tasked, with the defining age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. We have not been provided any instructions further than that. So at this time, that's what we're working on. We've got a few more minutes. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we don't have any other questions or comments. I'm cognizant of think time, so you may be trying to be quiet so you can think. Okay, well, I suppose we've come to the end of our meeting for this week. I just want to thank everybody, the work group and the public that have joined us today to assist us, for being on the call and for devoting your time to this important work. I will see you all again on November 3rd. And for those that are on the call that are from the public, you'll be able to see future meetings in FAR very soon, I would imagine. But if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to call me, and just thank you again. And I will see you all on November 3rd.
Thanks. See you later.
See you later.